Let's jump right in. Picture this. It's 261 BCE. We're standing on the eastern coast of the Indian subcontinent, and a really heavy, terrifying silence has just fallen over a massive battlefield. For 8 long days, the absolute juggernaut that is the Maurya Empire has just brutally crushed this small, fiercely independent kingdom called Kalinga. And standing right at the edge of all this unbelievable devastation is one man. His name is Ashoka. At this point, he rules literally the largest empire India has ever seen, stretching all the way from the mountains of Afghanistan down into the southern jungles. And Kalinga? Well, that was the very last piece of the puzzle, the only kingdom left that simply refused to bow to him. So he's just won this complete, overwhelming victory. But, as we're going to see in this explainer, what happens on this specific field completely shatters him. It triggers what is easily one of the most unbelievable transformations in the history of human power.
Now, historical accounts tell us that the local river, the Daya, literally turned red from the blood of the fallen. I mean, the scale of the devastation here is almost impossible to wrap your head around. We're talking about a human cost so staggering that it caused an absolute permanent shift in Ashoka's mind, right then and there on the battlefield. But, to truly grasp why a conqueror's reaction to winning would be so unusual and, honestly, so world-changing, we gotta have to look backward first. We need to look at the ruthless imperial machine that actually created him.
Which brings us to Part 1, the unlikely empire. So, a whole century before Ashoka stood on that bloody battlefield, his grandfather, Chandragupta Maurya, had stitched together this absolutely massive empire out of the chaos left behind by Alexander the Great. And the blueprint for this new, incredibly ruthless empire, it was essentially this document called the Arthashastra. It was written by his main strategist, Chanakya. And let me tell you, it is a chillingly clear-eyed manual on statecraft. We're not talking about some high-minded philosophy here. This is a practical, step-by-step instruction booklet for acquiring and holding on to power. It breaks down how to run a massive bureaucracy, how to manage a huge standing army, and exactly when to deploy calculated ruthlessness. The big takeaway here is that Ashoka was not raised to be some peaceful philosopher. Not at all. He was raised deep inside a sprawling machine that lived and breathed the cold, unforgiving logic of the Arthashastra.
If we track the timeline, Chandragupta built the empire, right? And then his son Bindusara expanded it. But here is a super fascinating detail from the historical sources. Ashoka was actually not the obvious heir to all of this. He was born to a queen of lesser status, so he grew up entirely in the shadow of half-brothers who had way stronger claims to the throne. But what Ashoka did have was ruthless competence. Because of this, his father sent him out to the far edges of the empire, places like Taxila and the super-wealthy trading city of Ujjain, basically to put down violent rebellions that the actual crown prince just couldn't handle. So Ashoka is out there doing the dirty, dangerous work of the empire far from the capital, and all the while he is quietly building up this fierce military loyalty in the shadows.
And that takes us to Part 2, Ashoka the Fierce. Okay, so when Bindusara finally died, the transition of power was, well, it was incredibly bloody. Ashoka steps right out of the shadows and systematically eliminates his rival brothers to claim the throne for himself. During these early years, he earned a pretty dark reputation. He was widely known as Chandashoka, which translates to Ashoka the Cruel or Ashoka the Fierce. There's even this wild legend that he built an elaborate torture chamber near the capital. The story goes that from the outside, it was designed to look like this beautiful, ornate paradise. But inside, a cracked, dark house of horrors where prisoners were tormented on his direct orders. Now, historians do debate the literal truth of that chamber, but regardless, it perfectly reflects the absolute terror he struck into the hearts of his very own people.
It really is incredible to see just how advanced this state machine actually was. For his first decade in power, Ashoka ruled through overwhelming force. He commanded a staggeringly complex bureaucracy. We're talking standardized weights and measures, state-run irrigation, and these vast road networks. But maintaining all of this, it required strict obedience. And he enforced that obedience with a highly thorough intelligence and spy network. It was so intense that even provincial governors were terrified of spies hiding in their own homes. It was a machine perfectly designed to extract compliance. And with all this unprecedented power at his fingertips, Ashoka set his sights on the ultimate prize, Kalinga. Now we reach Part 3, the blood of Kalinga.
You have to understand, Kalinga wasn't just a traditional army meeting them on the field. It was a fierce citizen resistance. Farmers, traders, local militias, they fought desperately for every single inch of their homeland. And the Mauryan army met that defiance with total, unyielding destruction. The numbers are just staggering. 100,000 killed, 150,000 forcibly deported from their homes, plus uncounted thousands more who vanished into famine and disease afterwards. Now I want you to really let this sink in. These are not estimates made up by some historians centuries later. These numbers come directly from Ashoka himself. It is his own public confession.
Walking through that scourged battlefield, looking at the burned villages and the displaced families, Ashoka experienced a profound moral horror. He actually had these words from what we now call Rock Edict 13 chiseled into stone across his empire. He openly grieves over the killing and the deportation, stating that the suffering now weighs on him constantly. Guys, this is an unprecedented public monument to a ruler's own guilt. Conquerors simply did not do this in the ancient world. They built massive monuments to their victories, never public confessions of their remorse.
This brings us to a massive turning point in Part 4, the Empire of Dhamma.
Completely shaken to his core by what happened at Kalinga, Ashoka did the unthinkable. He swore off wars of conquest forever, and he committed his state to a revolutionary new doctrine called Dhamma. So what exactly is Dhamma? Well, it wasn't strictly a religion, even though Ashoka himself became a deeply devoted patron of Buddhism. Instead, it was a comprehensive public code of ethics. We're talking respect for all living things, tolerance between different religious communities, honesty in your dealings, kindness, and crucially, restraint in the use of state violence. He essentially decided to take his own personal ethical awakening and turn it into the most ambitious communications campaign of the ancient world.
To actually make this happen, he rolled out some massive, highly practical reforms. First, he ordered his new policies carved into massive stone pillars and rock faces. And get this, he didn't use the elite court language. He used everyday local languages so ordinary people could actually read them. Second, he appointed special ministers of morality, known as Dhamma Mahamatras, whose entire job was to travel around and ensure the welfare of the people. And third, he built hospitals for both humans and animals. I mean, think about that. Ashoka literally transformed the most terrifying military machine in Asia into an empire whose stated, driving goal was minimizing harm. But his ambitions quickly grew way beyond his own borders. Ashoka started dispatching Buddhist missionaries outward in every single direction, following the empire's extensive diplomatic and trade routes. And one of the most consequential missions of them all, it went south, straight across the ocean to the island of Sri Lanka, a mission that tradition says was actually led by his very own son, Mahinda. So here is the really crucial takeaway from all of this. Before Ashoka, Buddhism was really just one of many regional teachings in northern India. But with the massive funding, the established road networks, and the full imperial sponsorship of the Mauryan state, Buddhism traveled those trade routes and permanently took root all across Asia. Ashoka's desperate, urgent need to atone for a brutal war ended up launching one of the world's truly great spiritual traditions. He literally changed the philosophical landscape of the world forever.
Which leads to our final chapter, Part 5, Forgotten and Found.
As we all know, empires are fragile things. Roughly 50 years after Ashoka died, his dynasty completely fractured, and this great emperor simply faded from historical memory. Which brings up a massive, almost unbelievable question. How exactly did India forget its most powerful ancient emperor? Well, the answer is a tragedy of time. The script that Ashoka used to carve his edicts into stone, the Brahmi script, gradually fell completely out of use. Within a few centuries, the people living right next to these massive 12-meter-tall pillars couldn't read a single word on them. The stones just became silent, mysterious monuments to a forgotten past. And they stayed silent for nearly 2,000 years. It wasn't until 1837 that a scholar named James Prinsep finally achieved a massive breakthrough. He cracked the code, he deciphered the ancient Brahmi script, and suddenly the silent stones spoke again. Historians everywhere realized they weren't just looking at the ruins of some minor local king. They were reading the very public, agonizing confession of ancient India's greatest conqueror. It really is incredible how we piece together a hidden history like this, from a fractured map stitched together by his grandfather, to a distant prince suppressing rebellions, to the blood-soaked river of Kalinga, and finally to a sailboat carrying an idea across the sea. It's this sprawling, interconnected puzzle, and putting it together has completely reconstructed the lost narrative of Ashoka's life, revealing a man who held the ultimate power, and then actively chose to lay it down. Today, the legacy of that choice is hiding right in plain sight. Take a look at the Ashoka Chakra, the wheel originally carved at the top of his ancient pillars. That very wheel now sits proudly at the absolute center of the national flag of India. It's been silently over 1 billion people today, many of whom rarely know the full, astonishing story of the Conqueror who chose peace.
He carved his greatest mistakes into solid stone so that future generations would not repeat them. For nearly 2,000 years, no one could read his warning. But now you have. Take that incredible thought with you today. Thanks so much for exploring this hidden piece of history with me. And as always, keep questioning the past.